making decisions, I wouldn't say on the fly, but making decisions very quickly throughout the day to a very drawn-out decision-making process that brings in other parties. And you want to do something, oh, we got to get the marketing guys involved. Or you want to launch something, get the branding guys involved. Or if you want to price something, get the pricing team involved and have them sign off on it and then sell it to the managers upstairs. And so you truly go from being able to, turn on a dime and come up with something in your sleep and put it in the next day to not being able to do that at all. So it was, it was very constricting. I'd say Yahoo was certainly way more constricting than Google was. Google was still, at the time, was still very kind of like hair on fire, kind of an entrepreneurial place inside. But Yahoo was very structured and very, very, very slow. So I ended up only staying there for about 3 months.
Oh, so you only were there at Yahoo for 3 months. So then you finished what you were doing, then you start Grand Central again. Now, did you ever have any problems with Yahoo over Grand Central? Was there?
No, not at all. They got what they wanted out of Dialpad. They were able to plug in and have Yahoo Voice, kind of immediately, and we had great kind of footprint of users throughout the world. So it was, it was kind of what they wanted. And they had a big messenger team, and this was a big part. So it wasn't like we were going to be this new giant group within Yahoo that we were going to lead or build. We were going to be part of the messenger team. At Google, on the other hand, there was no kind of like telephony group. There was Google Talk, but it was kind of a small team and doing IM, but not changing the world with it. So Google Voice got to be its own product, and we got to do our own team and do our own product and do our own launches and do our own PR and marketing and stuff. So that was much more enjoyable and more entrepreneurial. But still, I stayed there for 3 years, and that was I had agreed in the deal to stay for 2. So that tells you that it wasn't terrible.
Well, what's interesting to me is that transition, right? I don't know about your experience. I know about mine is in an entrepreneurial startup, when they're smaller, as you're growing, the employee engagement level is enormous, right? You know that you're head of IT, you know that even the second or third level project manager, they're really into everything that's going on. Everybody's talking. Now all of a sudden you're moving into a company that people are in job protection mode. Any big company is going to be fraught with lack of engagement. They do the studies. So how do you as an entrepreneur start having to deal with, you talked about having to deal with a much larger decision-making process, and you're dealing with employees who don't give a shit. Excuse me.
The nice thing is our entire team got brought over, so the core of the Google Voice team was my Grand Central team. So they were guys that I had kind of like worked with in the lean days and, scrappy startup times with. So they actually cared, and everyone had a lot of pride in the product. The people we worked with who were kind of like lifers at Google, they were good. They're just, there's just, the problem is there's just too many masters at that point. It's like, you want to go make Google Voice the greatest thing in the world, and there's 200 million users of Gmail, and we're like, okay, how do we put this into Gmail? And Gmail's like, whoa. We got 200 million users. We don't rock the boat on a lot of things. So it's, it's just, I wouldn't say it's turf or protecting territory. It's just more of, people have different priorities than what you have when you're just blindly following your own mission.
So how do you share your vision in that kind of environment? And I know, look, you left after 3 years, so ultimately you can only go so far with it. But how do you share your vision in that kind of environment? And at what point do you sit back and you say, okay, I can only take this so far in this environment. It's time for me to move back on.
Yeah, the good thing is if you have good kind of like product leaders, and I'd say, Larry, Sergey, and Bradley, those were good product guys, and they understood the value of it, and they gave us a lot of rope to go build it. So that helped. But frankly, the reason I stayed 3 years is my last thing I wanted to do is get Google Voice calling integrated into Gmail, which we did. And that was kind of where I realized, okay, here's now kind of a clean break point to do other more disruptive stuff was going to take a long, long time. So decided to leave and do it elsewhere.
Now, wasn't that around the time? Now, was it the last year of your 3 years that you were considered the entrepreneur in residence at Google Ventures, or quite frankly, was that just sort of a nice title to transition you to new pastures?
That was a real thing.
I mean, did they really just throw you out and give you a new title and say, okay, boy?
No, I wish. No, it was, I went to 3 years of working on the Google Voice thing, then Google Ventures was becoming a real big fund. At the time it was $100 million a year, and now I think it's double that. But yeah, so I went over there and had some ideas that I wanted to pursue in the voice space and the restaurant space, and really didn't have a clear idea of exactly what it was. So spent 6 months there kind of working on what it would be, and we ended up not being able to decide, so we came up with a labs concept and created an incubator.
So now you're back into the startup world. So, and this is what we're all doing here. So I talked in a different session, and maybe you can tell me, do you feel that entrepreneurship is learned, or is it something that people have built internally? That they're internally wired to be entrepreneurs, and they're going to be that anyway?
Yeah, I think it's more internally wired. I mean, I think when you go to conferences like this and you go to other places and you see guys who, have left good, stable, high-paying jobs to go try to change the world or come up with something interesting or new. That's kind of hardwired. I mean, that's takes some balls, and it just takes like a willingness to accept a lot of risk, and to know you're going to get paid less and work harder and want to do that.
Isn't that what all of us want to do?
It's a crazy thing, but and I have a guy I used to work for at this venture fund who teaches entrepreneurship at some business schools, and it's every time I go and sit in on classes or something, it always kind of throws me out how they try to here's how to be an entrepreneur and how to teach it, and it's all these things are kind of you have no idea what's going to happen the next day, let alone next month or next year. So it's one of those things that it does seem kind of hardwired. My man Jamie up here in the front row is a real entrepreneur.
Scary entrepreneur, yeah. Absolutely. Let's talk about that though. You've got certain people who are hardwired, and one of the big challenges is making that transition from entrepreneur, startup, to actually running a business. And I know Jamie and I have talked about it, and I've talked about it with a lot of people here, which is, are there different skill sets, and do you believe you possess those skill sets to actually run a business? And I'll go back real quick to a question I asked back in the green room, which is, when you started Dialpad, you bought Dialpad out of bankruptcy, or just about into bankruptcy, did you plan on being an entrepreneur of buying, building, and flipping, or were you going to run a company? And what do you think about the difference in skill sets, et cetera?
Well, I think, and I've been asked a couple other times or been on some other panels about, how do you get acquired and what does it take? And, frankly, what it took in our case was we weren't trying to get acquired in either case. We were trying to build a business and stay alive and raise more money and add more products and make customers happier and, provide great support and great value for whatever we did charge for. And I think if you do that as your goal, you have a chance of being acquired. If you go into it with hoping to be acquired, you don't have a chance of being acquired.
So basically,
you better focus on building a killer business, and then you have a chance.
So if you act cool, the girls will come at you, and if you're acting needy, then you got to beg the girl. Is that how this works?
That's not a bad analogy.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask him about e-com entrepreneur groupies, but I know his wife is here, so we'll bail on that subject today. Seriously, you've now met a lot of entrepreneurs through your work at Google, through your work at FireSpotter, which is your current activity. Tell me about the scariest meeting that you've ever had with an entrepreneur. Not scariest, but meeting where you walked out of the meeting wondering what the heck just happened.
That used to happen to me a lot. Back when I was a venture capitalist, I'd have meetings with guys, and literally they fell into two camps. And I was telling you this backstage, it would be half the time you'd meet these guys and you'd be like, I feel completely sorry that this guy's left his great job at Anderson or what have you to go do this. There's no way in the world that'll work. And then the other half would be so far over my head or esoteric that you'd be like, sit there for an hour trying to, try to keep the eyes open and try to take in exactly what they're saying. But at the end of the day, I'd be like, I have no idea what just happened in there. And then occasionally you'd find some that totally hit for you that are great. And so, I think that happens quite a bit. It's funny, and even the crazy ideas sometimes turn out to be great. And
what was the craziest idea that you heard that ultimately turned out to be great?
I can't even remember. I mean, there's so many of them, but yeah, I don't know. It was a crazy time. This was back in '99, free grocery delivery on a 30-minute window, selling it less than I could get it at Safeway. That was a crazy idea. It worked for a while. It was like a $4 billion company at one point, and then it went away. So I thought it was crazy, then I thought I was stupid, then I thought I was smart again when it failed. So I don't know. It's hard to tell. But even if nothing good comes of a first startup or a first effort, you do learn lessons along the way. You meet a bunch of other people. You certainly meet investors and stuff, and you kind of learn the process. So maybe it'll be better the next time.
So I guess being on both sides of it, were Dialpad and Grand Central venture funded?
Yeah, they both were.
They both were. So what was your worst experience with a venture capitalist? What can this group here take in terms of warning on things they should look for? It's pretty tough when you're already a beggar, right? You're in there begging for money to a VC. So what kind of warning shots can you give, having been on both sides of that negotiation?
Yeah, I don't know. Still to this day, probably the most painful thing as a CEO is raising money, even when you have a lot of good things in your favor. It's still a pain, and it's still. I hate having to ask people for stuff, and I certainly hate having to ask people for money. And when you ask people for money, you basically are saying, now you have the right to ask absolutely anything in the world of me, and I have to answer with a smile on my face because I'm the one who started this conversation and asked you for money. So I just don't, it's a huge distraction from your work. Your team's back in the office building the product, and you're out, meeting people all over the city and the valley, and it's tough. I think it's hard to say what's the worst of it. The worst of it is just actually the time sink and how long it takes to get a deal done. No matter how good it looks like it is, it always takes a long time.
But then you have the good side of it. The time suck is a huge waste, but then you have the good side, because I know that you've made a lot of really good friends, Wes being one of them.
Sure.
in your career meeting with these kind of people. So how important are those people that you meet during the process?
Wes is a special case. Wesley Chan, the partner at Google Ventures, because we worked together after we got acquired. He basically did our acquisition. We worked together for 5 years and got to know each other really well. So when he became a venture capitalist, it wasn't like meeting a venture capitalist. It was like, working with a guy you've worked with for a long time. It's interesting. Every VC will give you the pitch on why they're worth more than just the dollars they're putting in and why they're going to add value. And I certainly believe it on a lot of those, and then other ones I don't. And it's just kind of a weird feeling. But I think at the end of the day, you're going to be successful based on what you do, not what anyone else is going to do for you. And this goes back to being a venture capitalist. I remember guys coming in giving pitches, and they're like, all right, and then I'm going to partner with Comcast, and they're going to go sell this for me, or I got this great deal through Intuit, and we're going to be in front of 10 million businesses. It's like, if the success is riding on someone else doing something, it isn't going to happen.
Well, I want to thank, we've run out of time. I really want to thank Craig Walker. I want to thank all of you for coming in, and thank you all very much.
Thank you.